Welcome to AndyTube. In this video I'm going to show you how I remove and replace the thread take up system on this Singer Model 301A. And this Singer system that Singer uses is very common. If you saw my full restoration of the Model 404, it's basically the same. And if you look at model some of the 401s and 500 class like that, you will see it. So if this thread take-up system looks familiar to you, you could probably follow it well enough to do your machine too. Now the part that everybody is familiar with is the thread take up lever, right? When you're threading the needle and everything, you put the thread through there, and when you sew, it pulls up the slack on the thread, and that's the part you see moving up and down all the time. So that is just a small part of the whole system. There's actually about 10 parts to this system, and I take them out completely and clean them and polish them and check them for cracks and so forth, and put them back in when I do a full restoration. If you're cleaning your machine with a crud cutter and a product like that, you don't need to take this out if you don't want to. It's up to you. But you may have a damaged part someday, a bent lever or a broken off lever, or cracks in some of the links and stuff like that. And you first notice it when the machine starts binding up, when it's trying to sew. You're at the far end of the motor and all the gearing system and the arm shaft, so you're like at the end of the line for the power. And if this gets out of alignment, or you have a bent, cracked, or damaged part, it can really bind up the machine, and you can start having problems sewing. So the way to start this is the easy part. If you watch my videos about removing the presser bar and removing the needle bar, you'll know how to proceed here. And with the presser bar, you can even just take out the top, the adjusting thumb screw here, and pull out the link and spring, so that you get access to this area up here. But you do have to take out the needle bar and so forth to get here. And once that's out, here's the easy part. Look at this. Ta-da! That looks familiar, the little clamp and screw that holds the needle bar, and we loosen that and stuff when we check the height of the needle bar and set it and remove the link for that. And that's what that is called, is the needle bar connecting stud. And that's the easy part to take out and put back in. To get the rest of it out, you're going to have to loosen a couple of screws. Maybe I should go over some of these other parts real quick here. This is the let me think now, needle bar connecting link. So from the thread take-up, this is the needle bar connecting link that comes down, that the stud, needle bar connecting stud goes into and rotates. And then This is part of the thread take-up lever. This part right here. And this is like a rivet in here. So it's all linked together. And then there's a little part behind here that's called the thread take-up lever crank. And behind this cap screw, this is like a stud that goes through those parts and into the big needle bar crank here that's fastened to the end of the arm shaft. So that is what gives it movement. When the arm shaft is turning, it takes that connecting stud and spins it around, and that's what makes the lever go up and down. And over this part is called the thread take-up lever link, because it links from the take-up lever over to this hinge stud over here, and that's called the thread take-up lever hinge stud, and it's an eccentric hinge stud, and that's how you get the movement. It looks like it's just, you know, like going around, but there is a stud that goes into the body, and up on the top here, that's showing up in my, yeah, barely up in the top here, there's a set screw that goes through the body into a flat spot on that stud. And then this is a cap screw that screws into the stud, and it's like a swivel that lets it swivel just up and down and like that, so that the take-up lever can function. Okay, and to get this system out here, well, there's another down here in the needle bar crank. There's a set screw that holds the thread take-up crank that I talked about. There's a set screw that holds that in. So you're going to have to loosen that set screw enough that that crank stud can pull away from the needle bar crank. And then your choice over here is either to take off this cap screw so that you can pull the connecting link here off of that stud, or, and I recommend you go up to the top and loosen the set screw up there, and then you can pull the cap screw, take-up link, and the stud all out in one piece. And the reason that I recommend that is because on many machines you'll see this screw, cap screw, damaged. And there's two reasons for that. The slot for the screwdriver is very narrow and shallow, and that's because the head of this big old screw, the head's very thin, so the slot for your screwdriver is very thin. So it's narrow and thin. Like none of my screws with my Chapman hollow ground screwdrivers, none of the tips will fit in there. Well, by the time I get to one that's narrow enough to fit in there, it's tiny. You know, it would just rip that slot. And the other reason I don't recommend this, and that you see it damaged, because this is like a backward screw. To loosen this screw, you turn it to the right, and to tighten it, you turn it left. And most people don't realize that, so when they get up here and say, I'm going to take this cap screw off, they put an ill-fitting screwdriver in there and start turning it real hard to the left, and it really can damage the screw. So If you want to separate that for some reason, I still suggest that you remove the set screw up here that holds the stud and pull the whole thing out. Then you could put like a vice grip on the stud and then a screwdriver here, and you could work at it if you wanted to separate it. So I'm going to show you a picture of the top section up here looking down. So you see the access port, the hole in the casting of the body that allows you to put a screwdriver down in there to loosen the set screw here, and then you'll see this set screw up here that I'm talking about. So let me show you a slide of that real quick. And there's a couple things here. The cap screw here, the slot is vertical, up and down, and that's what aligns the flat spot on the stud for the set screw to set into. Okay, and on this hinge screw here, you'll see it's not perfectly horizontal. To get to that screw, you have to adjust, turn the hand wheel and get it so that you can go down from the top and access that screw, and you'll see that this is not horizontal. So let's say that it's 4 o'clock or a quarter to 4. How's that? 3:45. And you're going to want to picture that to help you remember when you're reassembling that that's the position that is, to line up the flat spot on the stud with the set screw up here. Okay, I think that's enough warnings. On the top is easy access, and we'll just put our screwdriver in there and it's left to loosen, and you can take it out if you want, or just turn it kind of more than halfway out so that it clears the flat spot. But I'm going to take it out just to show it to you what the whole thing looks like. There's the slotted end, and there's the flat end that rests on the flat spot of the stud. Then the next thing we want to do is loosen the set screw that's holding this crank stud into the needle bar crank. And because of my lighting, it's very shadowy in there, so I'm going to use a little pen light to peek in there, make sure I got this. Oh, I wish I'd have found a stronger flashlight now. That's not helping me. Bummer. Okay. Let's see if I can maneuver another light over here. The set screw is about the same size as the other one that I showed you. Okay, I got my screwdriver in it now, and here's what's going to happen. As you're pushing down to turn it left, see, everything slips. So you've got to hold something. You've got to hold the hand wheel real tight, or you've got to hold the lever, something here, the crank, so that as you push down to make sure your screwdriver's in there, and you start turning left, that it doesn't just fall away from you. And I turn this out. I try not to turn it out all the way, but it's got to be turned out fairly far to clear the flat spot on the stud. Now you can see this whole mechanism, just like most parts on a sewing machine, are very fine tolerance on everything. Look how close all this comes up here when it works. And because of this lever articulating stuff here, it has to kind of be removed, those two studs pulled out at the same time. Now this stud is shorter and the end of it will come out of the needle bar crank before this stud comes out of the body casting. But you can't just like pull this out and then pull the other. So you've got to either try and wiggle them out together or pry them out together. I don't want to block you here. Let's see if I move that back now. See if I gently, okay, see that? Now that's starting to come. That's good. So if I gently pull a little bit, I mean a little bit, and then pull this one a little bit. Oh, it's already got pressure. Oh, there. Sometimes pushing in and out, rocking it, I guess I would call it, will get it to slide out together. Trying to pull near both the studs will. Once the stud on the crank comes out, oh, it's almost there. Come on, yeah. There. Oh, okay, good. They both came out. Yay! Okay. Here's a little better view of how it was in the front. So it was kind of sitting like that in there, right? Now this part is very easy. Look, it's going to slide right off. But do yourself a favor and take a picture of it, how it sits there, how this part goes towards the nose of the machine. Okay, and that's because the connecting stud and the clamp is going to sit in the front of it like that. Remember, and we pulled this out at the beginning. So when you're putting this back together, if you put it on backwards, this is going to hit the crank. It's going to hit the needle bar crank up here. So just take a quick picture. Everybody has a cell phone or a little digital camera, and capture that so it's easy for you to remember. So there's the crank and the crank stud. Can you see the flat spot here? That's where that set screw sits to hold it. Because this can't turn. This is set on that flat spot so that it stays like that and just turns with the whole needle bar crank. And these levers and stuff are what articulate and move. So by the same token, here's the flat spot on this stud. See? And that's where that set screw went in up here. And you can see a little bit better when I said it's eccentric. The part back here, as it turns, you'll see it's not perfectly round. So even though the set screw holds that stud in place and the stud doesn't turn, as these parts articulate, it's what helps give it the clearance as the lever is going up and down and the needle bar is going up and down. And this is here's a pretty good shot up here. Now you can see, you know, where that stud sits up against, and I showed you how the set screw goes down in there. And this is the needle bar crank. Now there's another set screw on the bigger end here that sets the holds this needle bar crank onto the end of the arm shaft. That disc in the center is the very end of the horizontal arm shaft. The other end is connected to the hand wheel. So that set screw holds the needle bar crank onto the shaft. But the set screw that you access from up here is that you loosen is what holds the other. I take that back apart there. That's what holds this other stud in there and on the flat spot. That set screw. So you're getting a better idea of how that looks back in there. Now I'm going to take a break here because I want to clean these parts, and I'm going to try and take some close-up pictures of them and stuff like that, and then we're going to just kind of reverse all this and put them back in. So you've really kind of done the hard part now, is getting those two studs to slide out of these two areas together. And you know, if you take it out and you replace the part, or you just clean them and everything like that, then when we go back in, it's a lot easier, as you will see. Okay, so I have my parts all cleaned up, and I pre-oiled them, and I put some oil in the two holes for the studs, and I want to reattach the link back on here with pointed towards the front. And the best way that I have found to put this on is to put this stud in first, just a little bit. It's a tiny bit longer than this stud, so I found just to nudge it in there a little bit. Whoops. And then I want to try and line this one up and get it started, because they really need to kind of go in there together at the same time, because there's just, like I said, the tolerance is very close, and there's just not much room to play with. There we go. Okay, make sure that's not hung up on anything. Now you want to push them both in fully, but we're going to tighten this one first, because the link gets pushed all the way firmly against the needle bar crank, and that's the one you want to tighten in position. And that gives you the correct clearance here for the take-up lever. So there, I can wiggle that up. See if I can get that turned to about the right position there. I think I lost my... There we go. And all the way in. All the way in. Let's see if I can see down in there and get into that set set screw. That looks good. So I'm on that flat spot in the stud here, And I'm just going to check in here with my flashlight and make sure. Yes, I can see that that link is tight up against the needle bar stud. Now I already started my set screw over here, and the trick with this is to prevent binding is that you kind of let this go, turn this with the hand wheel while you slowly tighten the set screw, because if you feel that it's out of place and start to bind, you'll notice it. And you see where this is right now, when the needle bar stud and the needle bar are in here. This is usually where it wants to bind on you, right in this spot. So what Singer says is to just keep rotating it. Of course, I want to be sure this is vertical for the flat spot. And if this there's a little bit of play here, see? With this in and the set screw tight, there's still a little bit of play here. But if it's sticking too far out, it's gonna bind up. So we'll make sure this is up. We'll push it back, get my set screw started, and I think you'll recognize what I mean when I say bind, because it's rotating real smooth for me, especially I don't even have a motor in here or anything. And if all of a sudden it starts to hang or hesitate, that's what we mean by binding, and it's not doing that at all. And I can see it's flush back there, so it feels real smooth. It doesn't hesitate. Very nice. Double check that this is all the way back. I think I'll go in there and just double check too that I have that set screw good and tight in there. Alright. And it's the take-up lever is not dragging on here or anything, so I'm in good shape. I'm just going to put my needle bar stud back in there. Ta-da! So that's removing and reinstalling the take-up lever. Sweet. I know you want to grab your machine and get right on this, don't you? Very good. No large amount of play or anything in there. We'll find out if you put your needle bar back in and test it then. If you do feel like you get a little binding, you can loosen that set screw up here. Make sure everything is lined up, and then turn it with the needle bar in place and re-tighten the set screw. And it kind of just, it's kind of like a self-leveling thing. You'll find the right spot for it. So tiny amount of play in there, and that's good. You don't want binding. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. And if you ever have to do that or want to do it, now you know how. I hope you come back and see the next video in the series with, oh no, we'll do some more remove, replace, and any adjustments that are required with that part. Take care now.